And I just think it's a perfect way to lose trust with people too. Yeah, you might be touching on a topic that you care about and you can provide insight into, and it does that for you, but when it kind of feeds it to people in the same way as everybody else, sounds like everybody else, and it sounds like nobody at the same time. And so I was on this mission of like, how can
Mm.
I solve this? So I would say I'm about 90-95% of the way there. I've got something I'm building right now called the Ghost system.
Welcome finally to the podcast. I mean, it's funny that we're going to be discussing technology, but there have been multiple technological fails in the lead up to this conversation. But here we finally are together.
That's the truth. That's
Yeah.
the truth. I think we were trying to do this in 2025. Here we are in 2026. So
Yes.
a lot's changed.
And we're doing it in one of the fastest moving technological revolutions that I've ever been part of, which is quite interesting.
It's chaotic and a whole lot of fun at the same time.
And I think when we started, like at the beginning of our conversation, we were introduced by mutual friend, client, person, Lisa from Buddy, and you've done a lot of visual work for them in terms of helping them build tools and systems and processes to use these things to actually generate a branded story, like a visual signature that they could do. And when we had our pre-call, the thing that I wrote down that I found quite interesting is this idea of how do you think about capturing a brand essence in a tool? Because one of the trends I'm seeing now is like as these tools become better and easier to use, everything's starting to look the same. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we've been through these different visual trends with these tools, and like everyone's putting out stuff that looks and feels the same, and in our world, different is better than better. Like, so if you're gonna look exactly like your competitors, you may as well not do it. Do something completely different. So how do you
Couldn't agree
think
more.
about how do you think about using these tools and like actually pulling in a bit of personality, a bit of soul, a bit of kind of
Yeah.
identifiability into them?
Okay. This is a really great question. I mean, and this takes me back originally to kind of getting in to this space in the first place. My background for the last 11, 12 years prior to really like AI becoming accessible was leading, in marketing, leading marketing teams, specifically in SaaS startups, doing everything and anything. Mm, And when I go back to sort of like really like an inflection point for me, I was already playing with some of the AI tools, specifically Midjourney at that time. Photography is a hobby of mine. I have a really good eye for these things. And obviously, like I consider myself like the creative side of marketing, not, more so than the analytical. Obviously, both is ideal, but I always leaned a little bit more toward the creative part. And what really got my mind going was once I was playing around with tools like Midjourney at that time, I just become such a master at that tool and what was currently available at that time, where I was able to really create high quality imagery that really like just matched what was in my head. That wasn't always an easy thing. It's much, much easier now because the technology, the coherence of these models gotten so much better. But at that time, it was right really like trying to solve a puzzle. You had to find the right formula to do these things. And, just sitting on my own marketing team, it was like, okay, we're in this niche space. There's not a lot of stock photography out there, if any, that feels like we could use it. And then we didn't have this big budget to go and hire, photographers to take a bunch of shots. And there were all of those logistical elements and finding the right people and blah, 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 blah. So I just instantly had this moment where it's like, okay, I've become so good at this tool now. I think I could start creating on brand imagery for us using AI. Now, this was back in early 2023. This was a novel concept. No one was
Mm.
doing this yet. And I just started testing it and trying it, and sure enough, like, within a month or 2, we started incorporating, AI imagery into the fold. And so thinking about things like icons, illustrations, even some photorealism elements. I know photorealism is probably the most polarizing part of that, but that was really like this moment in time where it's like, "Oh, if this is possible, I know this is a pain point for other marketers," right? Like, that is a huge issue that we all encounter, And to your point, how do we stand out? How do we differentiate? Well, you need like visual elements do a large part of that lifting for you. You know, you think about
Mm,
a brand's digital visual footprint. I mean, it's really massive. There's massive opportunity there. And so for me, I stepped into that, and that was a similar problem that I solved, for Lisa over at Buddy. She was actually one of my first clients, like going out on my own. And it was just that. It was like they were in a space where, hiring a photographer to go on site to like these metal recycling plants and this and that, and having the right people dressed the right way, perfect lighting conditions, right? Taking shots from different locations. Like it just, that wasn't really feasible from a budget and logistical standpoint where they were at the company at the time. And, we just I recreated that same thing, but in a little bit more of a, I would say a structural and clear processed way. And even that's evolved since then. So kind of circling back to the beginning part of your question now, which is how do you, kind of build out this visual identity? I did something really, really interesting probably about 6 or 7 months back with a big client of mine, Fortune 500 company, where we built a visual identity toolkit. So essentially, it was this long, massive, comprehensive, holistic document that describes exactly who this brand is, their aesthetic, the things that feel like them, the things that don't, right? Like, which is also important with anything that you do with AI, the positive reinforcement, also the negative reinforcement. And
mm,
by the end of it, it was like 33 pages long. So that's great, but it's also like no one's going to read 33 pages. So what I would do in that situation was I took that 33 pages, synthesized it with AI, consolidated it down to a system prompt that then could be used either as a copy and paste to prime an LLM or to put it into like an agent or GPT, right? And then that way it's primed already. All I need to do is describe exactly what I'm creating for this particular campaign or project. And now it's operating with all of those rules and guidelines that we already set forth for the visual, aesthetic and brand identity. And now it just spits out, right, these prompts that are formulated and templated in a structure that I've used, in a lot of my work, and I know it works. And so that might be a little bit confusing to some people, but essentially what we're doing now is rather than me teaching somebody exactly how to prompt for something, level them up on all the vernacular, photography, lighting, camera angles, subject, distance, right? Like elements that really tell stories. We've already done all that and we don't have to train. Now it's just like I could have anybody from the team come in, put in a project, and now they can get those exact prompts to just copy and paste in whatever model they're using, right? And
mm.
get predictable, consistent output. So I think like that sort of like circle in itself has just been like a massive, massive thing. And it's evolved, right? Like every 6 months or so because the technology just keeps getting better and better, changes the workflow, changes the process.
I think it's, there's a couple of things that are interesting in there. The one is, obviously that work on spending the time on things that you wouldn't have necessarily spent the time on before, because people are obviously using this either to replace an agency or because they can't afford an agency. But in theory, a lot of that stuff sits innately in the creative team, right? So I understand, like, okay, this is the feeling I want. These are the colors. I've seen your thing. I know you like shiny and blue and big and epic or whatever, verbs we're sort of using. You have to spend the time thinking about that for yourself, either on your own or with, like a human team, like making sure that we think the base of this thing is right. So getting that, what did you call it? A visual identity toolkit, like right, is so critical because I don't think people spend the time doing that.
I know. I'm a big fan of front loaded work.
Yeah.
I love solving something and spending time up front, knowing that it's gonna come get easier and easier over time, requiring less and less work. So like that was a perfect example of that. But also to your point, right? Like if this is sitting with a creative team and you have brand guidelines, those are really made for people, but at the same time you're expecting somebody to go through and really internalize all of those rules,
Mm.
you know from a human standpoint, right, which can fluctuate depending on how much sleep you got or how you're feeling or do you still like your job. that could
Yeah.
all depend on how well you
Do you have
interpret those
24
types of
hours to do this
documents.
brief?
Yeah, right? And that lives with you, but, like, what if you leave the role and then somebody else has to come in and learn those things and then audit those things, right? So it's just, finding ways, the right ways that you wanna incorporate, AI into your work. AI can do a lot of things. Does that mean that we should be doing everything for you? Probably not, right? It's like really just trying to pick the right areas that it can solve for and
Mm.
do it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I like the second piece that I think is interesting is that I think people have tried to outsource creativity wholesale to these tools, and that's wrong, in my opinion, because the tools are just a representation of what's being put in them. Like it doesn't, they don't, they don't necessarily create anything. They just go and look at everything that they've got access to, and then they make a representation based on that information. And I think people should be spending their time being creative with these tools. They're spending their time. This is what I really want it to feel like. This is the problem I'm trying to solve. These are the ideas that I had. This is the weird thought that I had on the treadmill this morning. This is the thing, blah, blah, blah. And then use it to bring that to life in a new way, as opposed to going, make me a campaign for my brand to sell more things, like, which is going to get you something fairly flat and not, it's going to be humanly compelling. It's going to come off as a little bit alien, and all of this stuff is said with an asterisk, because I've seen some brands do really crazy AI stuff, and that's just part of their idea. Like, they've embraced that, and that's,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is also,
yeah,
they're
sure.
going in the other direction as everyone else.
That reminds me of, like, when AI video was really bad, there was the crowd that was trying to spend as much time as possible to making it look perfect, which just, was so hard and so tedious to do for a long period of time, versus somebody that just sort of their strategy is embracing the hallucinations or the morphing or the errors that occur
Yes.
in the video,
Yeah.
right? As sort of a strategy. And in a lot of ways, those videos performed a lot better. And I think, from a creative standpoint, it's probably just more fun and less pressure given where the tech was at, right? Like, obviously, AI videos come so far and it's gotten so much better. But for a long period of time, there was about the 90% of people that were just trying to, like, push it as far as it could go and make it look as perfect as possible, but it couldn't get there. And I just thought it was such a cool
Mm.
idea for those that leaned into the opposite side of it.
I think it's, for me in all of this, is to not forget, like, there's that Builder.ai, like
Oh
that
my
company that
god, yeah.
raised
Yeah.
$500 million, and it turns out that they were just a bunch of developers in a large warehouse in India somewhere, like, just programming at, like, rapid speed. That was what was happening there, which is insane. But we have this belief that these technologies will magically solve things, and I think we have an opportunity with where we're at right now, is to actually embrace the humanity in it. Like, how do we as humans show up more, and how do we use these things to represent our own weird ideas? Because the ones that have really worked and really resonated is when someone as Sony has created something interesting. Like Buddy, for example, is like a good, they like play with the visual. They've got their visual signature and they have fun with it, and it tells you the personality of who they are. I'm not looking at that image trying to go, oh, this is 100% real representation of
That's
what's
right.
happening in the world. Like, they're telling me a story using a visual. And I think that's where people, like, the hyper real, like, attempting to replace a fashion photographer with an AI fashion photographer hasn't landed very well. But people who use these tools to create visuals that tell a very specific narrative that they are trying to communicate in whichever aesthetic you want to kind of play that in, has been more successful. And I think that's, it's a disconnect of, this technology is not going to magically make your bad idea good. It's not going
Totally.
to magically make your boring concept amazing. It's not going to automatically take a poor input and upgrade it to something that's amazing. But it does have the ability to put the creative power into the hands of people who didn't necessarily have the technical ability in the
That's where we're
past.
at. And that's like the first of all, what you said was spot on, but I think that's the most exciting part is you're not like no one is confined to this formal career path that we were all sort of on. And what I mean by that is I wasn't a creative director, an art director, graphic designer. Did I like those things? Yes. Did I try to do those things as much as I could when I was a marketer? For sure. But I also wasn't going to be able to just step into a well-known agency and get a creative director job, right? And I wasn't
Mm,
able to just go out and probably get well-known clients and do that type of work. This has really just democratized all of that, right? The barriers to entry, you don't need this formal pathway. And again, with the way that how significant AI is embedded and will be in the things that we're doing personally and professionally moving forward, this isn't going away. So it's just those people that took advantage of the early window and found opportunities with it have been rewarded and will continue to get rewarded with those things. I just think it's fascinating. Same can be true even right with the product side. Right now, like I've got a client, a well-known platform. They need a lot of like internal tooling and so forth. And I'm not a product builder. I'm not an engineer. But I've been playing with Claude Code. I built things, right? I wouldn't have been able to do those things before. And now they're tapping me and say, "Hey, can you build this, right? For something that we're gonna use for
mm.
thousands of employees," right? Like that would never happen. And so it's just that's all a product of being curious, testing and trying things with this technology and just finding things that really appeal to you. And it opens up this wide lane for all of us to just kind of like say, okay, am I kind of liking where my career is headed? Do I want to pivot? There's never been a better time, right? To find a new lane or explore that new lane than right now.
I also think for companies, there's a great opportunity. Like if I think of a company that's embraced technology really well over the years is like a Nike. Remember, they were one of the first people to have that little pod you could put in your shoe, and
Oh
they
man.
designed the shoes with a little hole, and then the Nike Run app. So they were like playing with technology, which wasn't their thing at the
Yeah.
time, but applying it back to their product. And I think now you don't have to be Nike, so you don't need the $25 million or whatever it is
Also
that
a
they
great
spent
point.
building that experience. You can like go, what in my world, around the people that I serve, around the problems that I'm solving, can I build that solves a very specific problem or does a very specific thing? The kind of things that you wouldn't do like under normal
Yes.
scenarios. I mean, a friend of mine is building a chief of staff for mothers. So it's a family running tool. So it's going to help the mom do all of the jobs that she needs to do and remember all of the stuff and
Ooh.
be reminded
Love
that
that idea.
Tina's ballet is at Wednesday at 3 and this and it's now changed and you have don't forget the t-shirt on Monday. And then on top of that, the budgeting for the household and all of these things. But nobody would spend the time chasing that particular market, but because he sees that need in his world with his partner, he's like, "Oh, I can solve this." And he's not a software dev, and he's not like he doesn't have a team of 50 people, but he can build a product around a thing. And I think it's coming back to branding is like branding is a promise of solving something for someone. Like it's a we do this for this group of people. And now there's opportunity to build products, experiences, softwares, like abilities to make things more consistent, more amazing, which is, I think, super interesting and exciting because it comes back to that humanity again of I know my world so well. So I know where things come undone. So I can now solve some of those problems. And if they're coming undone for me, just like you said, like you built it for yourself as a credit, like for your marketing team. But now this is relevant for other people because you're not the only one trying to market a product. There
Yeah.
are millions of people trying to market that product.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating time because I think especially for anybody that would consider themselves curious or creative. I mean, there's really to your point, right? Like there was probably just so many things and so many reasons why that person wouldn't have done that before. Whereas now there's maybe 1, 2 obstacles that could be in the way, and it's probably just, like, time
Mm.
and then potential resources. I mean, the cost is no longer a factor, right? You could build an MVP of just about anything in hours to a few days, almost anything now. So, I
Mm.
mean, just the concept of that, right? Visually, again, same thing. A lot of people kind of take AI and think that it's got to be this all in or all off kind of thing where we're either using it or we're not. The truth is somewhere in the middle. You don't have to use it for everything. It could be a small part of this process. It could be a large part of the process. It could be in internal work. It could be in a little bit of external work, right? It doesn't have to be, hey, we're just using AI for everything. And it shouldn't be, right? But I think like that alone opens up so many doors here because I mean, I was just thinking about me as a, one person team. I've got clients. My days are really focused on, maximizing the hours I have. And then I buy a lot of tools. I have to have a lot of tools. But I was just thinking, hey, like Calendly, pay, $140 a year for Calendly because I have multiple calendar setups synced with multiple, calendars. And I was just like, you know what? I wonder if I could build my own, built it in a day.
Mm.
Built my own replacement in a day. I didn't know anything about authentication or APIs for the calendar or none of that stuff. Just wanted to make my own, see if it was possible. Worked. Okay, cancel Calendly. Like, I just think, like, there's also this idea that a lot of these simple SaaS products, I mean, if you don't have a comprehensive, complex product at this point, that could be troublesome. Anybody could create these things, start a business, sell things on the
Mm.
side, undercut, things that at a fraction of the cost. I just think, like, this is the most disruptive time, and I don't even think we're fully there yet. I mean, I think probably by the end of this year and into 2027, really gonna start to see that because we were just talking about it before the show. I mean, you you got a Mac Mini doing the open claw, you're exploring the open claw thing. I mean, I'm testing and building all these like tools either for clients or myself or processes. I mean, the real, I think, opportunity here is the personal context that you can provide with AI to break out of the box of the outputs that everybody else is getting, right? Like
Mm.
just as much information as you can share, right? So, for example, Claude for me knows all of my business client contacts, my communications with them, how they like to be communicated to, the projects we've worked on together, right? I've got a memory layer set up for that. So now I can just say, "Hey, write an email to Tom about this." It knows exactly the project I'm talking about. It knows exactly the past conversations. It's primed with past conversations between me and Tom, all of those things. And so I think like this just dumping of internal personal context is just something I'm completely fascinated with at the moment.
So do you think the companies and brands that are gonna stand out are the ones that are gonna, kind of embrace that? Because I was on a call just before this with someone, and he was talking about, like, he's so tired of all of this AI stuff that he wants something that's human made. So I see it has the potential to split into, like, almost 2 distinct camps. There's, like, people who are deliberately staying away, and then there's like people who are embracing it and using it to build these custom things and these tools and these
Well, I mean, I
processes and
guess the
things that are
question is
super
like, do we have a
interesting.
problem with things that AI makes versus humans, and where does the line split? I think like when I think about my
Mm.
personal experience, I think the most polarizing parts of that are things that include photorealism, people, real elements. So you brought up photo shoots earlier. Could AI replace photo shoots right now? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've run several experiments on that. I could even show you something right here. It's a whole workflow where I could take any person, any model, as long as I've got, an image of them, the items that I want them to wear in the background, which I can create, number 2 and number 3. Right? I could even create number 1. Then, using sort of like a process of how I want to prompt it, I can build all these different photo shoots. I can change the texture of the shirt. I can change the color of the shirt. I can change the type of shirt it is, the jeans, right? The pants, the shoes, whatever it is. But I think like when it comes to those things, the personal craft of it, people don't like that's the polarizing part. Me as a like I would still it would mean more to me if I hired somebody that I knew was a good photographer and I like their work. That would be exponentially more valuable to me to have them do it versus have AI completely do it. Just because I think it's more
Mm.
personal, right? and you're helping another person in the process, which I think will also be a bigger issue in the future. But to that point of not having AI do everything, why can't I use both? What if I hire that photographer and we didn't get all the camera angles that I wanted to get? Now I can create those. I've got all the raw materials from the photo
Mm,
shoot that I can build to expand out that world with different camera angles. What if I forgot to shoot one of the shirts, one of the pants? What if I forgot one of the colorways I wanted to show? What if I've got a new product coming out that I want to put on that same model, that model's not available, right? Like
mm,
that's where it's like, okay, those 2 things together, not one or the other. So I think that's really the
mm.
opportunity that I look at, but I think it's like all of that art, craft, creative element, personalization touch, those things I think will be a little bit more polarizing and a harder choice for us. But the things that happen in the background, I mean, I don't care whether a human does it or AI does it, you know?
Well, I think it's also there's times when a human wouldn't do that, like because you don't have you probably wouldn't have hired a chief of staff to look through all of your conversations with someone to like make sure they've got it and summarize the thing and give it to you. You just would have done without. You probably would have done it kind of badly. But I love this idea that there is, you know, I think there's a confluence of things for brands to think about. It's like, what are the processes that you have that are distinctly yours, that make you feel like you? What are the things that you do that nobody else does? And then, are there ways that you can use these tools to like personalize that or make sure that it happens all
Yeah.
the time, like regardless of whether Drew had a good night's sleep or not, like this thing happens, like it always happens because these tools have kind of got the ability to sort of do that. And I also think it then, I see everything as like a bundle of resource, right? So if you're a brand or a company and you've got X budget and you used to have to spend a bunch on tools and analytics and like all of these things, and now in theory that can go away. Like I put all of our Google Analytics into Claude, and I was like, "Tell me the 10 things I need to do
And
to
you're I
improve
mean,
my webs."
and don't you just remember how painful it was to go into Google Analytics and try to find something that you wanted to find? I mean, my
Yeah,
god.
and I also don't even have the ability to process that information, so it would be right there in
That's
front of me, and
true
I
too,
wouldn't see
right?
it.
Like
But like
yeah,
so now, but now you've freed up all of this budget, and this is I think coming back to humanity. Now you can spend it on the other stuff, the stuff that used to be nice to have. Like we wouldn't have hired a photographer or a better photographer, or we wouldn't have had
that's
a
right.
stylist,
That's
or we
right.
wouldn't have had somebody hand illustrate 500 things because we just didn't have the money for it. But now that if we can pull out all of this other budget, now let's spend it there because I think that is super interesting because now I've got an artist who's done 100 paintings for me and I can use that as my training.
Yes.
But I've got 1,000
Yes.
images, for the next 18 months to 2 years. Like our visual style is completely done. The artist is happy because you bought 100 paintings from him and the rights to kind of do this. And you aren't going to look like everyone else because you bought this like little human thing that he maybe did something that you might not have done. And I think this is where the wholesale outsourcing of creativity freaks me out a little bit because I'll have an idea in my head, right? And I've been doing this for 25 years and I feel like I've got a good idea. But sometimes I'll talk to the junior designer on set and he'll be like, "Oh, what about a insert idea here?" Or she'll be like, "Have you thought about this?" Or like, "I don't like that because of the following reasons." Or "Have you thought about this thing?" Or "I was listening to this new song and it made me feel this way. And I feel like we could bring that feeling into this with whatever." And suddenly the product, the feeling, the brand, the emotional bit of it is much more deep and complex, which is something that still to this day, I mean, the tools might get there eventually, but only humans can do that stuff. Only humans can capture that undescribable essence, and it's often when more than one human works together on something is that kind of
Yeah.
happens.
No, it's a really interesting point that you just made. Yeah. I agree. I mean, there and I think we're all making that choice and those decisions may evolve. right? I mean, what we want
Yes.
AI to do now, we may not want to do later based on experiences, based on the way the technology changes. And the opposite is true as well, right? Things that we maybe do right now, we decide we don't want to do. I think I just sort of look at least in my own personal work, some of the things that are these recurring tasks, how much input is required from me, right? If there's not a lot of input required from me, but I know I still need to do something, why not have somebody, AI sort of play a role in that process?
Mm.
Versus something that, I need to have all of, requires so much context. And that's where I think even using AI just to kind of get you to acting, taking you from the 0 to 1 also helps because this is a collaborative tool. Just by me providing all of that context, I can start to understand things that maybe I should have asked that I didn't, right? Or other ideas. Or if I don't know how to do something
Ooh.
troubleshooting, and I think like AI is so good at troubleshooting things as well, right? I mean, I get stuck all the time in things. And what'd you have to do before? Like you had to ask somebody you knew, you had to go online and search for, you had to maybe find a YouTube video, and even then you had to watch the video to see if they actually answer the question, Like what? Like, that is not something
Ooh.
that we have to spend our time doing anymore. So I just look at, like, those low stake things, recurring tasks, collaboration on bigger ideas where maybe I don't have somebody that's easily accessible or in the room where I can start to just kind of take it from 0 to 1 and, really feel like I've got a better grasp of clarity in what I'm doing and what I'm trying to achieve with the output.
I love that. I mean, I guess where this is coming to, and maybe there's some input you can give for people, is like a lot of this is around, I think, getting to a point of everyone needs to become better at curating.
Mm,
So everyone needs to become better at collecting the things that they like or want represented. Like, what are those things? And they could be kind of like anything. Like, it could be a simple piece. I mean, I've got this here on my desk. It's hard to see, but it's my son made a tiny little green
yeah,
fried
that's
egg,
awesome.
and I just love it because it sort of represents a thought that
Yeah,
he had. Like, he had this, like, and he's 7 years old. He was like, "I wanna make a green
right.
egg." And he wants it because he read a book by Dr. Seuss called Green Eggs and Ham. He was like, "Why do we need the ham? Let's just make green eggs." And, like, I love that idea. Like, so that's my little curated thing. So sometimes when I'm thinking, I'm like, "Okay, what is my green egg here?
Mm.
Like, what can I play with in this thing?" So how do you, when you're setting these systems up, how do you think about the curation of them so that they can do their job better without falling into that kind of AI,
Okay.
generic
Yeah.
feeling that so many
Yeah.
people
I mean,
get?
I can it's a big question. I have a few things I can get into to answer that, I think, directly. With something like Claude, in really how it's changed the game with, I think, these markdown files, all these sort of like files that have depth within them that are almost like these subfolders. That's where you're really getting into context. So, for example, like Claude, when you start doing, stuff with Cowork or Claude Code, you need like a Claude MD file, right? Which is essentially like your master document, and it's all about you, right? It's really just about your preferences. You could be your curation, the things that you like, the things that you don't like. And I think like that specifically is one document that I've just spent a ridiculous amount of time on. And the reason for that is because Claude takes that into account every time I have a conversation with it. Right? I've already primed it with that information. It's the most important file at this current time that you can have, with the system. And so, like, I spend a lot of time with giving it, context into me. And so that was kind of what I alluded to earlier, but I'll give you a really good example of this. So we all know how AI LLM writing sounds and looks. I've read it so much. I'm a
Mm.
former content person. It drives me nuts. I mean, you go on LinkedIn, go on, X, whatever platform you want, even videos now with the scripts. You can just tell ChatGPT, LLM wrote it. There are patterns that emerge, right? And as a content person, that stuck out to me because I was always like, "Man, how can I get this to not sound like AI, right? Like an LLM wrote it." I wanna have it give me the 75 to 80% and me build on. I'm cool with that, but like I don't want to kind of keep making these same edits every time. And I just think it's a perfect way to lose trust with people too. Yeah, you might be touching on a topic that you care about and you can provide insight into, and it does that for you. But when it kind of feeds it to people in the same way as everybody else, sounds like everybody else, and it sounds like nobody at the same time. And so I was on this mission of like, how can
Mm.
I solve this? So I would say I'm about 95% of the way there. I've got something I'm building right now called the Ghost system. And essentially what it does is the idea is that I can have it write for me at an exceptional level without it sounding like AI at all. And I thought at first this would be a very easy problem to solve for, right? I provided some writing examples. It knows the way I write and this and that and the other. Still doesn't do it. Wants to inject, these little pieces where it sounds like AI and an LLM. I'm like, that's what do we do about this? So I started to identify the
Mm.
patterns of all these things. And so now I've got examples, but now I've also got, what I call like the kill list. All these patterns that LLM uses, what I want it to identify and not put in any of my writing in the future. So I started building that out. But going back to then I started building my own voice file, right? So going like in the examples, that would be a portion of the voice file. But to that level of curation that we're talking about, that specific, I started giving it words that I use, words that I don't use, right? I don't use however, I use but, right? I don't use this word, I use like a slang word instead. These are like my verbal ticks. These are the verbs I use, right? Like these are the things that I'll never say. These are the hooks that I like to use. These are the architecture types I like to use in my posts for social media. Like I just went so deep, like 22 layers deep of this voice profile. And so I've got that, the kill list. I've got all these sort of like little components that work together as a chain that happens every time I ask Claude to write for me. And now I've got it to the point where, there are no LLM patterns. It sounds exactly like me. I'm 95% of the way there with anything that I have it create. But that's all because I spent so much time on the context, the specifications of me. And I think that's the same when it comes to curation and taste of anything, right? A lot of people say right now, and I was one of the first ones to say this, taste is the moat right now. It was the moat. I
Mm.
think that's going away too. I think like taste is a little bit more of a amorphous thing. You need to put in the reps. It's very subjective, person to person, what you've been exposed to. But hypothetically, right now, I can build infrastructure that helps me with taste through specificity, through context, through examples, right? So it's just like spending the time to build those things to then have it operate at that level. It's just where tech is right now. It can take longer than it should. I'm seeing the same pattern that I started to see with AI imagery and AI video. It was like, yeah, it can be good, but you got to do all these loop arounds to make it as good as possible. And then the tech got so much
Mm.
better where it's like, oh, it's really easy now. I think the same thing is going to be true here. It's just how much time are you spending, to develop that right now? So I think that's a long answer, but hopefully that like shines a little bit of light in the way that I think about it. It really just kind of comes down to
Mm.
spending a lot of time providing that deep level of personal context into anything that you're trying to do if you want to get a predictable result that's true to you. And the same could be true for a brand, right?
Mm. Well, I think it's the thing is people often don't want to spend the time here.
And who has the
Um,
time? Who
it
has the time right now?
feels
Things change so wildly. I think that's the other thing.
Yeah, they do, but I think at the same time, like, what I like what you're saying is, like, investing in these things, like, these are assets,
That's the way that
right?
I look at it.
This is not your asset, like, so you'd invest time and energy and effort into building this thing because you're using Claude as an example today. If we'd had this conversation when we'd started, we'd be talking about ChatGPT, and in 6 months' time, we'll be talking about
Right.
Perplexity, and 6 months after that, we'll be talking about, like, whatever, like the Go-Go, like, thing, or everyone's building their own custom one. OpenClaw wasn't a thing. But I think what brands and people and companies are to think about is like, what are these assets that we want to build over time? Because the logic will remain forever. Your kill list, your do's and don'ts. But like, it takes time to really sort of invest in
Ton
this
of time, a ton of time.
and to pull it out. And I think gets faster. I mean, I've been using these tools as like a brain dump. So like, I'll start a project. So I know I've got this client coming in. I'll just start dumping all my thoughts into this thing. And I say, don't process anything. Like, just right now, your job is just to
Yeah,
catch
yeah.
everything that I'm doing. And I'll tell you at some point in the future to sort of do it. So you just dump and dump and dump and dump. And this is the curation piece. So you're dumping, 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 dumping. And then when it gets time to the ideating and the creating part, now it gets much easier. So I think the shift is everyone always wants to spend all the time on the end, right? Now we're saying we've got to spend a bit more time up front.
Yeah,
We
go
need to
upstream.
like
Yeah.
do this kind of stuff. Because if you do that stuff right, then it can release so much of the painful, time consuming work and so much of the expensive budget to let you then spend better time at the
Yeah,
end,
yeah.
like on the polish, on the fun stuff. So now we've invested up front and we can now spend all of our time in the fun part at the end, but we have to do this part in order to make it feel like a brand, in order to make it have personality, in order to make it feel like something somebody would actually kind of care about, as opposed to, I think the word you said is this thing can destroy trust. And I fully believe that. Like, there's a guy I know who I had a lot of respect for who's now got AI bots commenting on everything.
Oh, no.
Like, I'm done,
So
man.
so
I'm like done. Like, you can't
that's
even be
that's
bothered to
another
come
thing
talk to
though,
me. Like,
like, okay, hypothetically, if I wanted to do that, though, if I spent as much time like, if I produced and built a specific thing that was focused on how I leave comments, going back to that ghost system, right? That I started first with how I typically write, like, LinkedIn social media posts, right? Because that's most of the time what I do with the writing stuff. But,
yeah.
like, from a comment side, you could do the same thing hypothetically if you wanted to do it. It's just it needs to know how you comment. You also would need to scrub, right, all of those AI hints that it leaves. So you can so what remains
Mm.
is true to you. And, I agree, man, like, those AI comments, I mean, they're out of control. They're really bad. But I think, like, again, if you were to spend the time up front just dumping personal context, examples, then, in theory, you could solve that.
So I'm aware of time. So I'd like to ask you one more question. We've had the time delay from when we had this conversation to where we're at now. In your opinion, like, not even an opinion, like, what are you excited about that the next, 6 to 8 months are gonna do for us? Like, what are the spaces, the opportunities, the exciting things that people can like get into now?
Oh god. Man, I mean, it's really exciting right now for me. I don't know what the future holds. I think, like, not to be too existential about this, but I just hope that this technology at the end of the day ultimately is guided by the right people. It's in the right hands.
Mm.
It's very powerful stuff, right? And I think, in a lot of ways, all of us at a larger macro level are going to be like jobs are going to be wiped off the board. There will be other new jobs that pop up. But at the same time, I don't like, I just there's so many questions in my mind how this is going to play out over the next 3, 5, 10 years. I mean, I've got young kids, think about this stuff all the time. I think right now it's really exciting because anybody can do anything. The tools aren't perfect, right? And kind of what we were talking about earlier, sometimes you have to like double check things and maybe it made an error it notices later, but it didn't notice in the moment. I don't know if you experienced that, but like as I'm building things that require like multi components, like everything looks good. And then the next day, oh, something's broken. What's going on? Yeah, I got to figure, oh, I didn't see this first time. But I think it's just
Yeah.
really, really exciting for those that are playing with it because you're starting to realize that really anything is possible. You can be anybody you want to be in the sense that you could make a career pivot virtually overnight. You could, essentially, this is a competitive advantage if you know these things really well inside a company. I mean, let's be honest, going back to the time thing, there are plenty of situations out there right now where people are so busy in their day-to-day job that they don't have time to play with these things. They maybe have played with them at a
Mm,
very foundational beginner level. And I think that's the reality. I've talked to plenty of clients like that. And even just thinking about my time in house, you don't have time to just kind of like go off on a riff, for an hour or two and see what's possible. That's the advantage, I think of being in this work day to day is I do get to play with around with that stuff. And even then I feel like, oh, I saw this and I want
you'd
to
be
try
left
this, but I don't
behind.
have time, like but that alone,
Yeah,
I think is just such I'm so enamored by that because it feels like I'm 40 years old. To me, it feels like when I was a kid and I got on dial-up internet for the first time and I got, AOL, welcome, and you're just like, "What do I do?" Like, this is crazy. This is a whole new world. And that's what it is right now. I don't know what, this looks like in 3 to 5 years, but I think if I'm a company, I have got to upskill my employees. There's gotta be some sort of way that you're upskilling employees. Yes, you're gonna lose people, but you have to be doing that. You can't just hire people that don't have, sort of like this innateness or curiosity about it. But also they gotta be piloting things. They gotta try micro experiments. They gotta figure out what it means for them. What examples are they gonna use AI for? What situations, scenarios? Where are they not? Because it's just gonna be harder and harder to catch up later down the road. You don't have all of that context that existed beforehand. So I think that's part of it. But in terms of, like, something that's very practical, I don't know. I guess what I would just be excited for, maybe this is a little bit boring, but I just like all of those dumb, time-consuming things that we used to do that we don't have to. Like, my wife will still call up customer service and hang on the phone for an hour to get something resolved. I stopped doing that like 4 years ago. It was just so painful to me. But, like, that's a great
mm,
like, AI is just gonna disrupt a lot of these things that man, we're not gonna miss, and we're gonna forget about instantly once it solves for us. So I think it's, like, stuff like that, and, I don't know, I'm very optimistic for people that are embracing this stuff. It's still early, so, I mean, if you're listening to this stuff and you haven't done what you wanted to, still early, still early.
right. Drew, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I've got some stuff to think about in terms of have I gone deep enough in terms of training myself into these things, into building these kind of assets that I can carry from platform to platform. Have we done enough for our clients? Like, do they have this, like, have we built this for them so that their stuff can be kind of
Yeah.
better? Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, for your energy. And, despite all of the technological
We
failures,
got
the
here.
two humans got together in the end
And
and we
now
did it.
now
Thank
I'm
you
gonna
for
be thinking
coming
about
on.
that green egg. I want one of those green eggs.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. And we'll catch you in
Yeah.
the next one.
Thanks,
Bye
Rob.
bye.